Did the Philippines just pull the biggest political plot twist of 2025? For over 70 years, America has been our so-called protector, our biggest ally, even our lifeline in times of crisis. But suddenly, something has snapped. The Philippines is now openly signaling that it may cut ties with the US. And the real reasons are not what you think. Is this about money, sovereignty, or a secret plan to survive the rising storm in Asia? If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type interested in the comments, and I will give you a heart. For more than 7 decades, the Philippines and the United States have been inseparable, at least on paper. The 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty made it official: if either country was attacked, the other was obliged to come to its defense. For ordinary Filipinos, that sounded like a promise of security. After all, America had the money, the weapons, and the global influence. But here's the catch. In reality, the Philippines often felt like the junior partner in this relationship. While the US gained strategic bases on Philippine soil, like Clark Air Base and Subic Naval Base, Filipinos were left asking, are we really benefiting, or are we just being used? Then came the Cold War era. Washington treated the Philippines as a pawn to contain communism. Yes, the US funneled military aid and economic assistance, but it also propped up leaders like Ferdinand Marcos, turning a blind eye to dictatorship as long as Manila stayed loyal. Now fast forward to today, 2025. The Philippines is once again at a crossroads. President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. has been making moves that suggest Manila might be pulling back from its long-standing dependency on the US. But why now? What's changed? But then, look at the global chessboard. China is no longer the rising power, it's already the second superpower. The South China Sea is the new frontline, and the Philippines is right in the middle of it. For decades, Filipinos assumed the US would automatically defend them if push came to shove. But when China built military outposts on Philippine reefs like Mischief Reef and Fiery Cross Reef, where was America? Washington issued statements of concern, but Chinese ships stayed. That's when doubt began creeping in. Is the US truly ready to fight for the Philippines? Or is Manila just a pawn, again, caught between two giants? Type sovereignty in the comments if you believe the Philippines should stop being anyone's pawn and finally stand on its own 2 feet. Let's also remember the 2014 Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, EDCA. The US was granted access to more Philippine military bases with promises of modernization and deterrence. But what do Filipinos see now in 2025? Bases in Cagayan, Palawan, and Pampanga filled with US assets? Yes. But modernized Philippine ships, planes, and technology? Not much. But here's where it gets worse. Many Filipinos are realizing the US doesn't always have Manila's interests at heart. Washington's #1 goal is to contain China, not necessarily to protect Filipino fishermen in Scarborough Shoal. To the average Filipino, it feels like history repeating itself. America gains access and leverage, while Filipinos wait for promises that never fully arrive. Then consider the economics. The US has been one of the Philippines' biggest trading partners, but China has quietly overtaken it. In 2022 alone, China-Philippines bilateral trade hit over $38 billion, 0 cents, compared to $23 billion, 0 cents with the US. For an economy hungry for jobs and growth, it's becoming hard to ignore where the money is really flowing. And here lies the tension. The Philippines is torn between two global superpowers, one that promises security but feels distant, and another that offers economic benefits but threatens sovereignty. Which way should it go? But then Marcos Jr.'s administration begins dropping hints. Officials talk about an independent foreign policy, one where the Philippines isn't tied at the hip to Washington. They're not saying cut off America directly, but their actions, engaging more with ASEAN neighbors, welcoming Japanese defense support, cautiously negotiating with Beijing, suggest Manila wants options. Comment independent below if you think the Philippines should take a neutral stance and avoid relying too heavily on either the US or China. Now let's address the emotional layer. For many Filipinos, America isn't just a foreign ally, it's family. Millions of Filipino Americans live in the US, sending billions in remittances back home every year. Cultural ties, education, even military camaraderie from World War II and the Korean War still bind the two nations. To think about cutting ties feels almost like breaking up with a lifelong partner. But the younger generation sees things differently. To them, loyalty without progress is just stagnation. They ask, why are we still begging America for protection? Why aren't we building our own strength? This generational divide is fueling the debate in 2025. Should the Philippines cling to its historical ties with the US, or should it gamble on charting its own course? And here's the twist. The US itself is distracted. With wars in Ukraine, tensions in Taiwan, and domestic political turmoil, can Washington really afford to put Filipinos at the top of its priority list? Some argue that the Philippines may simply be preparing for the inevitable, a world where America can no longer be counted on. Drop the word future in the comments if you believe the Philippines must start preparing now for a world without American guarantees. We've seen how the Philippines and the US were tied together for decades, but also how trust is eroding. The Philippines want security and growth, but it feels like America's promises are no longer enough. But here's where it gets even more complicated. In the next segment, we'll uncover the real triggers in 2025 that pushed the Philippines closer to walking away, from military tensions in the South China Sea to secret deals you might not have heard about. In politics, relationships don't collapse overnight. They crumble slowly until one event makes the break feel inevitable. For the Philippines and the US, that moment may already be happening in 2025. For years, Washington promised it would stand with the Philippines against Chinese aggression in the South China Sea. American warships patrolled the waters, and US officials gave fiery speeches. But when Filipino fishermen at Scarborough Shoal were harassed by Chinese coast guards in early 2025, America's response was the same old line. We are concerned. Concern doesn't stop Chinese water cannons. Concern doesn't protect livelihoods. Now, Filipinos ask the question they've been holding in for decades. If the US won't act now, when will it ever act? Type protect in the comments if you believe the Philippines deserves more than just words, it deserves real action. Now, let's talk about money, because geopolitics is always about economics at its core. In 2025, the Philippines' biggest trading partner is China, not the US. The numbers are clear. Over $40 billion, 0 cents, in bilateral trade with China compared to around $25 billion, 0 cents, with the US. And it's not just about imports and exports. Chinese companies are investing in infrastructure, tech, and even renewable energy projects. But here's the danger. Economists warn that too much reliance on China means losing leverage. Manila doesn't want to swap one dependency, the US, for another, China. This is why Marcos Jr. is exploring something bold: diversification. Looking at partners like Japan, South Korea, Australia, and even Europe for trade and defense cooperation. Then comes the shocking twist. In mid-2025, reports surfaced that Washington is reconsidering its aid programs to the Philippines, redirecting funds toward Ukraine and Taiwan instead. For many Filipinos, this is the final insult. Decades of loyalty. And when the chips are down, Manila isn't prioritized. Drop the word priority if you think the Philippines should never again be treated as second class by any nation. But let's step back for a moment. Cutting ties with America isn't just about disappointment. It's also about opportunity. The Philippines sits at the center of Southeast Asia, a region with booming trade, rising influence, and a combined population of over 650 million. ASEAN is now one of the fastest growing economic blocs in the world. Manila repositions itself as a neutral power, trading with everyone but controlled by no one. It could become a new hub for business and diplomacy. But this shift won't be easy. The US has deep roots in the Philippines, from military agreements like EDCA to education, culture, and migration. Pulling away could mean losing some benefits: military training, advanced weaponry, and Washington's political shield at the UN. Then again, some argue those benefits were never fully delivered anyway. The armed forces of the Philippines still rely on outdated equipment, and modernization moves at a snail's pace. If cutting ties means forcing the Philippines to finally build its own independent defense and economy, is that such a bad thing? Let's not forget another spark, the Taiwan issue. In 2025, US China tensions over Taiwan are boiling hotter than ever. If conflict erupts, guess who's stuck in the middle? The Philippines, because American bases here would automatically make us a target. That's not protection, that's a death trap. But here's where things get even scarier. Military analysts warn that if war breaks out, the Philippines could become a battleground, whether Filipinos like it or not. And the US may not even guarantee post-war reconstruction, leaving the country devastated. Then the logic starts to click. Maybe distancing from America isn't about betrayal, maybe it's about survival. If you agree, the Philippines must protect itself first, type survival in the comments right now. We've uncovered how 2025 is creating breaking points, America's weak response to Chinese aggression, shifting US priorities toward other conflicts, and the danger of being dragged into a Taiwan war. For many Filipinos, the writing is on the wall. But here's the real question we need to tackle next. If the Philippines truly pulls away from America, what comes next? Who will step in as partners? And will this be the rise of a stronger, more independent Philippines or the start of dangerous isolation? Stay tuned, because in the next segment, we'll dive into the possible futures that await the Philippines after turning away from the US. So here's the million-peso question. If the Philippines really distances itself from America, what comes next? Because let's be real, cutting ties is not just a headline, it's a gamble with the nation's entire future. And in 2025, the stakes couldn't be higher. Imagine this, Manila no longer waits for Washington's approval. Instead, it forges its own path, signing bold new trade deals with Japan, South Korea, Australia, and even India. The Philippines becomes a gateway to ASEAN, where business flows in from all directions, not just the West. But here's the twist. Independence doesn't just mean more money, it could mean more respect. No longer seen as a junior partner, the Philippines could finally act as an equal player in the global arena. Leaders from Tokyo to Brussels would visit Manila not as a courtesy stop, but as a serious diplomatic hub. Then the dream becomes bigger. With a strong economy, the Philippines could invest in real modernization, better ports, bullet trains, even space technology collaborations. Instead of importing hand-me-down fighter jets, it could build its own defense industry. A proud nation, standing tall. If you believe in a stronger, independent Philippines, type rise in the comments. But let's not get carried away, because cutting ties with America could also unleash chaos. But here's the fear. What if China takes advantage? Without Washington's umbrella, Beijing might feel emboldened to push harder into the West Philippine Sea. Scarborough today, Palawan tomorrow. The risk of losing territory becomes painfully real. Then it gets worse. Investors could panic. If global companies see the Philippines as unstable or too risky, they might pull out. Jobs could vanish. Overseas workers might face tougher immigration policies in America, where millions of Filipinos still live and work. That's not just numbers, that's families torn apart. And we can't ignore the emotional connection. Millions of Filipino Americans call the US home. Cutting ties would shake families, remittances, even cultural bonds like music, movies, and education. America is more than politics. It's woven into Filipino life. To suddenly sever that cord could leave scars for generations. Comment reality check if you think isolation is a risk we can't ignore. So here's the conflict. The Philippines stands between two futures, rise or ruin. And the truth is, the outcome depends on leadership, strategy, and courage. But there's another layer most people forget. Neutrality itself can be power. Look at nations like Vietnam or Singapore. They don't fully side with the US or China, yet both command respect, attract billions in investment, and keep their sovereignty intact. The Philippines could follow this model, carefully balancing alliances while protecting its own interests. Then comes the big question. Is Marcos Jr. willing to take that bold, risky middle path, or will he simply swing from one master to another? At the end of the day, this isn't just about politicians, it's about Filipinos themselves. Will the people demand independence even if it means short-term sacrifices? Or will fear of losing US protection keep the nation chained to old patterns? One thing is clear, 2025 is not just another year, it's a turning point. A year when every choice, trade, military, migration will shape the Philippines for decades. Answer this in the comments. Should the Philippines go fully independent, stay tied to the US, or take the middle path? Your voice matters. So far, we've seen the history, the breaking points, and the possible futures, but now the toughest question remains. What does America really think about all this? Behind closed doors, how does Washington view a Philippines that may no longer be its ally? And is the US ready to fight for this relationship or let it slip away forever? And that's what we'll uncover in segment 4. The truth is, America has been watching closely, and let me tell you, Washington isn't taking this lightly. On the surface, US officials speak politely about respecting the Philippines' sovereignty. They smile, they shake hands, but behind closed doors, it's a storm. But here's the catch. The Philippines isn't just another country, it's a linchpin, a key outpost in America's Indo-Pacific strategy. With US bases shrinking in other parts of Asia, losing the Philippines would be like removing a queen from the chessboard. The balance of power tilts instantly. Then reality hits. Pentagon reports warn. Without the Philippines, US naval forces lose easy access to the South China Sea. That means longer deployments, higher costs, and weaker deterrence against China. The ripple effect could destabilize the entire Pacific. So yes, Washington is worried. If you think the Philippines is America's ace in Asia, type ace in the comments. But it's not just about warships and bases, it's about money. Did you know the US is one of the Philippines' largest trading partners, with billions flowing back and forth each year? American companies, from tech giants like Google to fast food chains like McDonald's, rely on the Filipino market. And here's the kicker. Millions of Filipinos in America pump billions in remittances back home every year. But imagine this, if ties weaken, those remittances could be caught in red tape. Visa rules might tighten, Filipino families could suddenly face barriers they never expected. Then the nightmare scenario unfolds. If Filipino nurses, engineers, and tech workers are blocked from US opportunities, America itself suffers. Hospitals lose staff, companies lose talent, the lifeline snaps on both sides. Comment respect Filipinos if you believe America should never forget the value of Filipino workers. So what does America do now? That's the billion-dollar question. But here's the dilemma. If Washington pushes too hard, demanding loyalty, threatening aid cuts, it risks alienating Filipinos even further. Nobody wants to feel bullied. And then there's the other risk. If America steps back too much, China fills the void. Beijing has the money, the ships, and the hunger for influence. For Washington, it's a delicate dance. Protect the alliance without smothering it. This brings us to the heart of the matter. Is the US-Philippines alliance broken beyond repair, or can it be saved? Some analysts argue that this rift is temporary, that history, shared sacrifices, and deep family ties will eventually keep the two nations together. Others warn that 2025 could be the year the Philippines truly pivots away, rewriting the script of Asian geopolitics forever. The choice at the end of the day isn't just up to presidents or generals. It's about the people, Filipinos, Americans, families across both shores who know that this bond runs deeper than politics. So here's the question we need to face together. Will this bond survive the storm, or are we watching the beginning of the end? Type together in the comments if you believe the Philippines and the US still have a future as partners. Or type goodbye if you think it's time for the Philippines to walk its own path. Because here's the haunting truth. If the Philippines really does cut ties, it won't just change Asia. It could change the world. A new global order is being born right in front of our eyes. And the only question left is, which side of history will Filipinos choose? For over 7 decades, the Philippines and the United States have been tied together like family. From World War II, when Filipino and American soldiers fought side by side, to the present day where millions of Filipinos live and work in the US, this alliance has been as real as blood. But here's the twist. History doesn't guarantee the future. All across the Philippines, there's a growing chorus. We are strong enough to stand on our own. But independence has a price. Without America's security umbrella, the Philippines must shoulder the cost of modern defense. Billions in ships, jets, and technology that Manila does not currently have. Then comes the hard truth. This independence also means saying no to easy aid packages and military hand-me-downs. It's about standing tall, even if it means struggling at first. Type independent if you believe the Philippines must take full control of its future, no matter the cost. We cannot ignore the elephant in the room, China. But here's the catch. Cutting ties with the US may reduce tensions with Beijing on paper, but will it really? China's ambitions in the West Philippine Sea aren't built on respect, they're built on expansion. Then what happens when Beijing realizes the Philippines no longer has Washington's backing? Will they respect Philippine sovereignty or test it even harder? Comment defend if you think Filipinos should never allow China to walk over their sovereignty. And this is where it gets personal. Families divided between Manila and California, Filipino veterans buried in US soil, generations of students and workers who dreamed of going to America to build a better life. But at the same time, a younger generation is rising, one that dreams not of leaving, but of fixing the Philippines itself. They don't want to be forever tied to foreign powers. They want to build a country that can stand proudly on its own 2 feet. And then we're left with the question, can a nation honor its history, protect its people abroad, but still rewrite its destiny without America? At this moment, the Philippines stands at a fork in the road. Option 1, maintain the alliance but demand respect and equality from Washington. No longer the little brother, but an equal partner. Option 2, break free, embrace a new path, and risk walking into uncharted waters where China, Russia, and new powers lurk. But make no mistake, both paths carry danger. Then again, danger is nothing new to Filipinos. From surviving colonial rule to rebuilding after wars and disasters, the Filipino spirit has always been about resilience. So here's the million-peso question: is cutting ties with the US a bold step toward true independence, or a gamble that could backfire and leave the Philippines isolated in a world of giants? Type rise in the comments if you believe the Philippines is ready to rise on its own. Or type together if you believe the alliance with the US is still essential for the future. The world is watching. Washington is anxious. Beijing is waiting. And Filipinos, they're standing at history's edge, about to make a choice that will echo for generations. Because in the end, it's not just about politics, it's about pride, sovereignty, and survival. And that's why 2025 could be remembered as the year the Philippines finally rewrote its destiny.